Hi, welcome to the Hangout. We're going to be talking about Mind Your Own Business today, and our topic is all about ideas that are going to help you with marketing your business. We're going to focus on some of the challenges that professional photographers face, whether that be explaining their services to clients or with working with other folks who maybe are not competing fairly, and we're going to give you some ideas. We are joined by two great folks. My co-host Skip Cohen is here, but before we toss to Skip, I'd like to take just a moment to introduce our guest, and then I'll have him tell you a little bit about himself. We're joined today by Kevin Ames. Kevin is a professional photographer out of the Atlanta area, and some of you may have seen Kevin at trade shows in the past. We first met at Photoshop World years ago, and I've always enjoyed Kevin's talks. He's also a member of ASMP, American Society of Media Photographers, and has been involved in leadership at the chapter level there as well, so he's got a good sense of business about him. Kevin, welcome, and what can you tell folks about your background?
Well, thanks, Rich. It's awfully good to be back. And, I'm a commercial photographer. Photography is my first and major love. And, just enjoy making photographs, talking about photography, working to help other professionals build their businesses.
Very cool, very cool. And we are joined, as always, by co-host Skip Cohen. Skip, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm a little off a beat. I took my computer in to have it serviced and sat there with an Apple Genius because I couldn't figure out what I was doing, and they changed a lot of things. So, what can I say? Here I am, and it works.
Yeah, I've seen that before. So Skip, if you get a chance, check if you are plugged into Ethernet. Otherwise, your Wi-Fi is just a tad slow today, but that's okay. We've all been there before. The joys of cable internet and variable speed connections. So we've got a great show here today, folks. We're going to be focusing on some of the marketing challenges that professionals face. And I just wanted to remind you, we do have the question and answer app running, so you are able to post questions if you're watching this on the Google Hangout page or you are watching it on YouTube. You can also post comments on the Google Plus page, and we'll try to take those questions and make sure that we answer them on the show. So feel free to post anything that's on your mind, and we'll get to that. But let's just sort of start off and set the stage for a moment. Kevin, you've been selling professional photography for many different years, and in the last 5 to 10 years, what has been the biggest change that's impacted how you sell your services, and what's really gotten in the way of making a living? What are the toughest things that you faced?
That's easy. It's right here, this thing. Everybody thinks that this item right here can do all the work they need to professionally, and it can't. It's a great camera. Gosh knows it's better than anything that we had when digital started. The thing about it is that everybody, I mean, Rich, it goes back a long time. It goes back actually to the beginning of Photoshop, and that was in 1990, 25 years ago. Back then, photographers knew how to make photographs on film. They understood lighting, they understood photography, because it was expensive to do it, and we actually translated the light and what we saw on a Polaroid into what was going to appear on the transparency film. Back then, I think Skip was president of Hasselblad, and I owned several of the cameras that I bought under his reign, and made a lot of money with them, because we'd show an art director a photograph on a Polaroid and say, well, it's not really going to look like that. And then there was that non-persistence of vision. They'd remember the set and everything. Then we'd show them the film 3 days later or 2 hours later, and they'd forgotten what everything looks like, and they thought we were geniuses. Well, fast forward to the digital age, and we the photographers that already knew photography, started learning Photoshop. Well, everybody was watching us, and they decided that they needed to learn Photoshop too, and they haven't learned photography, and it's coming around again finally. But what we've seen in the marketplace is the acceptance of quality has really dropped. There's a big syndrome of good enough. It's good enough for my blog. It's good enough for my website. And what that communicates to potential clients is that, gosh, just think, the work that I'm doing for you is going to be good enough for you too. It's not going to be extraordinary. So those are some of the challenges we're facing. It's perception of what is rather than the reality of what can be done.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, what we've seen is a rise in low resolution mediums. So people working with web delivery, with electronic delivery, presentations, digital magazines, and I think a lot of times convenience and speed is becoming a key deciding factor. So, Skip, you want to build off of this, and then maybe we could talk about how, you can't necessarily fight that, but how you can maybe turn that into a strength or what you can do with it?
Well, let's go more basic just for a second, because Kevin, first of all, I want to thank you for helping to pay for my kids' college educations with those Hasselblads you bought. I owe you big time, but there's still one college loan out there that you're welcome to take over for my daughter.
Sorry, Skip.
All right. The reality, I mean, digital hasn't just changed the technology, but in terms of how photographers capture an image. The reality is that the world has gotten incredibly small. So you're also working with a client base that now has access to thousands of other artists. And the whole issue of photographers, and the whole topic today is the challenges of marketing. The fact is that every client that you work with has found you after lengthy comparisons with other photographers. Obviously, there's some that today there is a huge marketing tool and advantage to relationship building, and that's a real key, and that's what separates you from the rest of the crowd. But still, when it comes down to an account exec at an ad agency that's out there looking for somebody to handle a particular project, and they've just been given an assignment of, well, go find me somebody that does some good stuff in tabletop, let's say. They're going onto the internet, and it's huge. The world is suddenly boiled down to what's in front of a monitor at an ad agency. I mean, at least back in the days when Kevin was talking about, if they could afford the black book was there, and it was a lot easier to go through and narrow it down. Now photographers have got to find ways to make themselves different, to separate themselves from the rest of the pack, because you're all out there at the same level in terms of how a client might perceive your work just looking at pictures. So I don't know if I'm building it or if I'm taking you guys backwards a little bit.
Well, you're absolutely right, Skip, and these are the challenges that we face. The idea behind marketing is it creates the opportunity to make a sale. And people quite often confuse marketing with selling. And marketing is all the things you do to build the image of your company and what you're doing. And our other reality is that we can't do all of the work that's out there right now. No one photographer can. If a photographer could get 10 new clients a year, that's a huge win in the marketplace. And they don't necessarily need to be ad agencies. That's the obvious one. But for commercial photographers, and you hit a good point, we've got to take a look at who is the customer. And I have members of my ASMP chapter that says anybody that's willing to write a check for photography. And that's not a customer. You can't market to that. That's like a chiropractor saying anybody with a backbone is my customer. It doesn't work. You've got to be able to define who it is you want to work with. Wedding photographers have it easy. They're looking for the girl with the sparkly ring. And then they can go ahead and make those contacts and build the relationships that you were talking about. Because that's the huge thing in this business now, is it's relationships. It's who you know and who is willing to refer you. Gold is an endorsement letter from a client.
Okay, well, to that end, let's talk about that for just a second, which is this idea of connecting with our existing clients and using them as a tool. One of the things that I'm continually amazed at is repeat business. Clients that, who had a great experience, I expect them to come back, but even others who, I thought had a good experience, but maybe we didn't hit it out of the park, still are often incredibly loyal. We do little things like following up after the job with a thank you note, and everybody who was involved in the project sending the note, connecting through the social networks to them so that they're aware of what we're doing. What are some things that you're seeing, Kevin, that are leading to repeat business? We'll talk about new business in a second, but repeat business is one of the easiest ways to market because you already know people who are willing to pay you at one time. Theoretically, you can convince them again to come back.
Well, it's being very responsive. I picked up a client, gosh, and it's a photographer that I've known for 25 years. And they said, oh, well, he does a really good job, but we can't get a hold of him, and it takes him 6 weeks to deliver the pictures. And so they hired me to shoot a job for them, and they had the pictures the following Monday. We shot on Wednesday night. And then they hired me for another job, and I delivered them the next day because they could take them by FTP. So speed and responsiveness is the big thing. I love your point of a handwritten thank you note, because email is now the junk mail. Where before art directors were throwing away our postcards, now they're junking our emails. So you send them something in the mail, and all of a sudden, oh wow, here's a real live piece of paper with information on it, and I might be able to put it up on my bulletin board. And it's new and unique to them.
Yeah, we actually just ordered brand new postcards and note cards with our logo and contact information. We revved our brand with a fresh logo, and I've always found, we work on a team approach. Most of our projects have a few people involved, and I found that by including everybody on the team signing and thanking, it often just makes a connection because, you'd like to think that your clients come back because of you, but what I often see is that sometimes there's other people involved that they bond with or they connect with. Maybe it's the producer, maybe it's the assistant, maybe it's the person who just simply answers their calls, So I always like to take that team approach. Kevin, what are some other ways with repeat business? You mentioned, obviously, excellent customer service and speed and return. Do you ever market specials to existing clients, or do you ever do specific communication to your email list?
Well, that's more of a retail thing. And that's something a wedding photographer might do. Like, I always tell my friends that are doing weddings, I say, well, 9 months to a year after you shoot the ceremony, you really ought to run a special for families. Commercial photography is so unique in that every job is different and it's actually custom. So it requires, individual billing, and I don't think that giving away money to get jobs is a good thing. You don't see Apple discounting very often, and everybody says that's never going to work. Well, they're the most valuable company on the planet, and they don't discount their stuff. So people that are not charging a good price, and by a good price I mean one that allows them to make a living and pay their bills, they're not only shortchanging themselves and all that they've done to learn how to do their photography and all the sacrifices they've made, but they're shortchanging all of us who are in the marketplace working to make a living delivering a valuable service.
Well, to that end, Skip, why don't you take a lead with that there?
I apologize. This is the challenge of a home office, so when you hear the dog barking, it's because somebody's at the door. Yeah, there were a couple things that Kevin reminded me of in terms of repeat business and building those relationships. And we share an old, very, very good mutual friend that the entire industry, including Kevin and I, miss a whole lot, which was Dean Collins.
Yeah.
And Dean, at holiday time, each year, if he had done an annual report, for example, for a client or a product catalog, Dean would get out and contact the president of that company, the CEO, and either he'd do it or he'd send one of his staff out to do a family shot for the holiday card just to say thank you. Well, that secured the relationship a lot more. David Zeiser, and I think David probably still does it, on the first anniversary of a couple that he's photographed, and he probably goes out to the second and third sometimes too, he would contact the bride and say, hey, it's been a year. I can't believe a year's gone by. Want to wish you guys a happy anniversary. I'd love to come out and just do a complimentary sitting of you guys on your first anniversary. Well, it's a word-of-mouth business, and it is relationship building, and what would happen is the younger the bride, in fact, it's still the same way. It's no past tense. The younger the bride, the more friends she has, that are going to get married, and the more things that she wants to share. Now, a bride getting a call from a photographer long after the fact saying happy anniversary, nothing is going to score points better. And then I made another comment here, and this is thanks to the internet and online hosting, but especially with the wedding side of the industry now, when you photograph a wedding, every single attendee at that wedding becomes a potential client. So being able to host images on a website, you know, now we all take it for granted that the pictures are going to be up in a certain amount of time, where it used to be, you know, a couple's going to wait anywhere from 4 weeks to 14 weeks to get their proofs. Now those images are designed, thanks to technology. A wedding photographer can have them up in 24 hours, 48 hours, so that the client can actually see them. And again, that's building a relationship not just with the bride and groom, but with every single person that was at that wedding.
Well, one thing I'd like to throw out, and then I'm going to turn the topic just a little, is I've become a big fan of doing face-to-face events. We'll invite people into our studio and have educational events. We'll make it a point to take a client out to lunch. You know, Kevin, I do a lot of commercial work as well, not working with individuals very often. And what I find is that by making that connection so that they think of me more often, or getting to their coworkers by doing an educational event that's helpful to them, it leads to opportunities. And so we'll put on educational events that ultimately are designed to sell some of the services that we offer, but by tying it into industry trends or tying it into things that are happening. For example, we've put a big push on explaining how video on websites is very helpful for companies, and by letting the CEO or key leadership talk and explain the vision for a company, how that leads to loyalty from their customers. Well, it also leads to them hiring us to make those products, and we can give them good examples. And so sometimes by taking the time to educate clients, they'll buy more from you. Now, I want to turn the topic a little bit, and let's talk just a little bit about the challenges, since it is both a global market and everyone can be found, the challenge of, oh, well, you're too expensive, or, you know, I found so-and-so, and I'd like to work with you, but, you know, these people are half the rate. Kevin, how do you handle the issue when people are trying to beat you up on price? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges these days, is that you can always find somebody cheaper.
Well, you have to determine whether or not they're beating you up on price or whether they've got a cash flow issue. I will offer terms. So if they've got a cash flow crunch, I'll go ahead and lay out a payment schedule, and they can either give me a credit card, or, you know, if I've done them before and they're trustworthy, they can send me a check every month, and I put the terms out, and the day that it's due, if the check isn't in the mail, I'm on the phone, and that helps. If they're trying to beat me up for price, I don't want to work for free. If I'm doing a special personal project, then I'm going to do that for free. I'm going to fund it out of my own pocket. But I'm not a bank. My job is to help a client sell their products, explain their stories, and communicate their ideas about their company and help them build their business. That's my job. And I've got anything I can do to make that easy for them, I'm going to do. And they have to pay for it. And frankly, I'd rather walk away than cut my price. My price is fair. And if I didn't have clients all the time and I was too high priced, I'd know that that was a problem. But I do have clients, and it's not too high priced, and the people that see the value in it keep doing it. I would suggest that price is never the conversation. It's like the word no. Whenever somebody says no, they're asking for more information. And,
very good.
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm looking for, you know, what can I do to make your job easy? I had a coffee, and I love coffees and I love lunch. I had a coffee with an ad agency, and the head of the agency was 25 years old. And he had contacted me by email. He wanted somebody to do some executive portraits. And so I sent him some samples, and I emailed him a month later, and he said, oh, well, the client had their own photographer, so they wasted both our times. And I said, well, they didn't waste mine because I got to meet you. let's get together and have coffee. So that email exchange evolved into a face-to-face. And then he had another project, and I sent him some samples, and he says, you know, all the other photographers I contacted said, oh, just go look at my website. You're the only one that sent me customized pictures that I could send to my client as an example. You made it easy for me.
We do that too, Kevin. I find it quite useful. We'll build custom galleries that feature work samples that are similar to what they're looking for, because you nailed it. A lot of times in the commercial world, you're dealing with the middleman, and I don't mean middleman in a bad way. You know, agencies serve a very important purpose, as do PR firms and all these folks. But or even if you're dealing with a bride or an end customer, they still may have a spouse or a co-decision maker. So making it so it's easy for them to get the info is pretty important. Skip, what's your take on this, or things you want to add, or where do you want to go?
No, I want to add something to that. Clay Blackmore is a wedding photographer in the Baltimore, D.C. area, and Clay gave me a great story a couple of years ago where he was photographing a wedding, and the caterer had asked him, could you do me a favor and just grab a few images of the way my guys have set up the buffet and the table settings. Well, Clay took it a step further and actually shot some video, which he then went back and edited and gave it to the caterer. Well, that caterer has now, at that point back then when he told me the story, had sent him 2 or 3 wedding clients. And it was all about the relationship building. It was all about Clay providing something extra. He didn't just walk away, photograph the wedding, but he made it a point to give images to the caterer. Now, in the same respect, whatever the job is that you're shooting, whether it's commercial, wedding is always very easy to use as an example because we all understand the players involved. If you're shooting a wedding at the Hyatt, for example, make it a point to get to know the sales manager at the Hyatt, the catering department, and offer them some of the images from the event that shows how their hotel looks. I mean, it's a freebie and it's relationship building. I had a couple of other notes here that we kind of closed on before we went off in this direction, but we were talking about video and video helping a client educate a client. There's also the ability for photographers, for everybody now, should be doing some kind of either video or a mixed media slideshow that shows who they are. Tell your own story. Do a self-promotional piece. In fact, SCU and Photodex are doing a contest right now searching for the best self-promotional piece. It's a way to educate your client. It's a way to show your personality. And then the other thing we've been talking about, Kevin was talking about, you know, the whole issue that you raised about, well, gee, you know, your price is twice what your competitor is. I had a guest post about a year ago from a photographer in the UK by the name of Simon King. And Simon's guest post was all about when a photographer is going to start thinking of themselves the same way that a chef does. If you're in a restaurant and you're eating a steak at a particular restaurant, you don't say to the waitress or the hostess or the chef, gee, why is your steak so expensive? I can go down the street to whatever and
Sizzler.
get it for, go to Sizzler for half that price. And I think one of the challenges is for photographers not to panic when you're turning away business. When you get a client, and if you're in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, for example, on wedding work, and you get a client that comes in that was hoping you would shoot it for $500 and hand them the disc, that's not your target. That's not your client. The other thing you can do, rather than discount and bring your price down, a lot of photographers now have some premium products that they'll offer. Maybe it's an additional album. Maybe it's a framed print. I remember Cliff Mountainer years ago saying he didn't want to bring his prices down, so he added an extra hour or 2 of coverage on that separated himself from the competition. So, you know, everybody knows where their price point is within their market. So if you know that you're on the higher end, then look for ways that you can create higher perceived value, and that needs to be part of your pitch. So that a client understands it's an educational process. Your client needs to understand that you do cost more, but you're also worth more. And it could be things you're doing in service. It could be additional products. It could be the quality of your work. Does that all make sense? I dumped a lot in there. Sorry, guys.
No, absolutely. And I just want to remind the folks who are listening two things. One, feel free to post questions into the question and answer pod or on the Google Plus page. We'd love to have your questions for today's show. After the show is over, a couple of you joined us a little bit late. You'll be able to see an instant replay available on YouTube. And a big thank you to two of our partners, SongFreedom, who has a wonderful collection of music available if you're looking to put together slideshows or videos, and Drobo, that make an excellent storage solution so you can back up your images. Now, here's one I have for you, Kevin. You use education a lot to raise awareness for you. You produce a lot of stuff. You write for Photo Focus. You speak at conferences. I'm curious if your experience matches my own, which is that sometimes I would have thought, oh, the room is just filled with my competition. A lot of times it's people looking for talent, or maybe they enjoy this, but they also have a professional need, and I pick up clients when I'm out helping other people. Do you see this as well? What role does education play in establishing your brand and helping to market yourself?
Well, credibility is the first one. If you are considered an industry expert and people are quoting you and you're writing for blogs, magazine articles, as you say, speaking at conferences like you do, Rich, and it sets you up as an expert. And I've done this for a long time, like you have, and my clients know my name. They've heard it somewhere, and they say, "Oh, you're the guy that wrote the book on photographing women." I had one guy call me up. He was a dentist, and he was going to be on the cover of a magazine, and he didn't want their photographer to do it because he'd seen my book in Barnes & Noble, and it happened to be here, and I got a job just because he saw my book on the bookshelf. Go figure. Anything you can do to help people know more about what you do and help them as an expert, it's gold. I had to have a passport photo. And so I went in this morning, actually, to have it done, and the thing came out really, really warm. Well, the photographer had gotten a new camera, and he didn't understand how white balance worked. So I showed him how to set the camera up, and he took another picture, and the white balance was right, and he was stunned. So, these are the kinds of things that we do as industry experts to help our peers do a better job for their customers, and then ultimately those customers, as they want better quality, will float up to us.
Well, Kevin, did he still charge you for the headshot?
Yep, sure did. But here it is, and it's the right color.
All right.
Other than being really orange, he says, "Well, why are they so orange?" So I had to explain to him how color temperature worked.
Very nice.
Oh,
very nice.
I want to hit on something that both of you just hit on. The fun part that the photographers don't always realize, whether it's speaking or writing or just writing for your blog, whether you're writing for somebody else, a magazine or not, doesn't make any difference. The issue is that everybody listening to this podcast right now, all of you know how to focus your camera, but you haven't spent the time focusing on your career, on your strategy, on your marketing. You haven't taken the time to know who your client is. I've been on websites and going through galleries, and I remember I did a portfolio review one night for ASMP in Cleveland, and one of the photographers had spectacular work and showed me his portfolio, and it literally covered every specialty in photography. And he looked at me like I was from outer space when I suggested that he hone it down and maybe he should have 3 different books. One is people, one is product, one is landscapes and fine art, or however you want to break it out. But he hit me with so much that everything lost its message. It was like looking for a sponsor's logo on a NASCAR at 180 miles an hour going around the track. There was too much there. And I think that's one of the biggest problems today for working professionals is just you got to take the time and sit down and think about who is my audience. In fact, I just did an upcoming podcast recorded today with Lori Nordstrom, and she was talking about marketing, and this is in the children, family arena, babies, maternity, and she talked about the importance of knowing who your client is first, and then start to think about how you're going to reach them. And that's all. When I think about speaking at conventions, getting your name out there, it's all about reach. It's all about becoming the guy who wrote that particular book that's sitting on a Barnes & Noble bookshelf somewhere, or who wrote something that somebody read on a blog recently that talks about some aspect of your business or your outlook or just your passion for imaging.
Now, we did get two great questions in, but Kevin, you had something you wanted to say, and then we'll take the questions.
Well, you never know where these kinds of things that you do are going to help you. I was on top of Printemps in Paris because I was there a couple of years ago, and I made myself the self-assignment of making a singular portrait of the Eiffel Tower. So I found a location, got the camera all set up, and the guy come up to me and he says, "We got to leave at 7:30." And I said, "Fine, I'll have the pictures I need by then." And he says, "Do you use Photoshop?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Do you read Photoshop User Magazine?" I smiled a little bit and I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My favorite column is the Digital Photographer's Notebook." And I'm sitting there going, you wouldn't believe it if it had been scripted. And I held my hand out and said, "Hi, I'm Kevin Ames, and I write it." So I got to stay there till 5 minutes till 8 and got the photograph that I want, merely because I wrote the articles, and you never know when that stuff is going to come around. It was just a wonderful story. So I went back to where I was staying, immediately finished the picture, and sent him a JPEG as a thank you. Now, I've never heard from him again, but I sent it to him so he knew that he was valuable.
No, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, education, guys, definitely does open doors, and that's something that everyone can do. I see so many people who are afraid to put themselves out there. There's always somebody who's more of an expert than you, and there's always somebody who's more established. Elena asked a question sort of out there. When you are getting started, how would you put yourself out there? What sort of things would you do to establish? One of the things that I would say, first off, is join professional organizations in your local market. You're going to learn so much, and if you don't have a professional organization in your local market, in addition to some of the online things, join some of these as well. Participate in these communities. But I think one of the things I would say is there's a certain benefit of face-to-face meeting. You can use websites like meetup.com or ASMP, PPA. You can find groups that meet in your area, and these are going to allow you to connect with other photographers. And it's going to be the casual conversations at Denny's after the meeting or over a cup of coffee while you're networking that you're going to discover some of these answers and are going to open doors for you. When people say, "Well, I'm busy, but here's this other person you can try," or they get overwhelmed and they bring you as an assistant on a shoot. Kevin, I know you've worked with a lot of assistants through the years. You've helped a lot of people get their start. You've also been an educator at the college level. How would you tackle this question? Because I'm sure you've got some great door openers.
Well, I want to go back to what Skip said. The first thing is, who is your customer? What kind of photography do you want to do? And that drives you to which organization. If you're portrait and weddings, PPFA is the Professional Photographers of America, is the obvious choice. I'm a PPA member, and I'm a certified professional photographer. I passed the test, and I can say that I'm one of, I think there's like 6 or 7% of photographers in the country that are actually certified, that we know what we're doing. We have to take tests, and so those are things that give you some credibility. If you are a commercial photographer and want to know more about business, ASMP, American Society of Media Professionals. If you are an advertising photographer, APA, American Advertising Photographers of America. These are 3 really good organizations, and they also will provide insurance benefits and things like that that help with some of the basic business stuff. They've all got a business component to it. So the first thing is to define your market, define what you want to do. Some people don't want to do weddings. I shot a lot of them. I decided, I agreed with Dean. I was glad that Skip brought him up. He said, "Oh, you're a combat photographer," to a wedding photographer once. And I said, "Yeah, I don't do combat photography anymore." The last wedding I shot, I wound up throwing the mother of the bride out of the church because people were heckling, and I just cleared it so I could get the pictures I needed, which is definitely a commercial move, not a wedding photographer move. And some wedding photographer friends were there, and they use that. To this day, they use it in their seminars. Don't have a commercial photographer photograph a wedding. It'll be great work, but it's not going to be a fun time. And
so did you actually get paid for the job still?
We were doing as a favor for a friend. It was back when digital was first possible, and Jim DiVitale and I did it for the manager of the camera store because we knew he couldn't afford to pay for a wedding for his, for the first kid, and so we did it as a freebie. and it was a lot of fun. But he was using a Leaf Vallejo, and I was using a Kodak DCS 760. This was back when it was barely possible to take digital cameras out of the studio and get a good job. So we had a good time. It was very fun. That was the last wedding.
Nice. Skip, anything you want to add as a door opener for a new person?
Yeah, I've got a whole list here. First of all, it's a great expression from our mutual buddy Scott Bourne, own your zip code. If you want to get out and start to get your name out there, literally draw a circle around where you live and get to know every business in the community. Start knocking on doors. I don't care what your specialty is. Introduce yourself as a photographer and let them know if they've ever got any needs, that it may not be your specialty, but you've got this great network that comes from being involved in all of those local guilds and chapters of different organizations. So you start building your network. Another one is to get involved in your community. This is about giving back. You're looking for your community to be good to you, so you better make damn sure that you're good to your community. And looking for ways to give back, volunteer. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go take pictures of an event. There isn't a community in the world that doesn't need help with some nonprofit fundraiser or the Chamber of Commerce, or for that matter, things going on in the school system. Every school system has had budget cuts over the last few years, and the arts tend to suffer the most. If there are things you can do to help the school, that's another way to get your name out there. Then it's images on display. Helen Yancey talks about how she first got started with images in a local coffee shop where she lives outside Detroit. Bambi Cantrell had images up at a Starbucks in Walnut Creek in California with her business cards on the counter, but as people are sitting there having a cup of coffee or having dinner in Helen's Diner, they're looking at the images around the room that are on the wall. And the other thing is your blog. You know, your website is about what you sell. Your blog is about what's in your heart. And being able to take your blog and start to get stuff out in the community and start to build a following or a readership is of providing you're putting out good content and you want to stay focused. Again, it's about knowing who your readers are, just like you need to know who your clients are. But your blog is another way to help you show images, help you show the passion, and be able to get the word out so that people start to get to know who you are. And that's a science. I mean, we could do another podcast or hangout just on that one alone, on the right things to do and how to blog. The biggest thing is to make a commitment and then be consistent.
May I dovetail in with that on just a second?
Yep. Go ahead.
Skip, you talk about going around to every business. That's a great beginning, but it takes, I mean, statistics show that it takes between 5 and 11, well, 5, 7, and 11 touches before somebody is ready to buy. So go make that contact, send them a thank you note, follow up with an email that maybe has a photograph that is somehow pertaining to what that business does. That shows that you've actually learned. Ask them how they want to be contacted and how often, and then honor that. And know that you're not going to get anything until you hit 5 to 7 and possibly even 11. So it may take, if they say once a month, it may be a year before you see any dollars from it. And you've got to be persistent, because 40% of the people that have done business with you, like you, and have had a good experience, work with somebody else. 60% of them, they'll go to 60% will go to somebody else just because they happen to be in front of them at the time they have a need. So you've got to constantly be touching. And the statistics say that if you wait 6 weeks, you've lost the impetus of the initial contact.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's tough because, you know, we don't want to be chasing dead leads. We don't want to be, you know, annoying people. But it really has to come down to, you know, we picked in a couple of areas of focus. My company primarily works with nonprofits, it works with trade associations, and it works with high-tech companies. We have 3 types of clients that we do a lot of work with, and our portfolio has just sort of grown in that way over the years. We have a few outliers here or there, projects that are unusual that came up that we took for one reason or another. But by defining that those were my customers, it makes it very easy to keep up on that list and keep targeting people, and to, I guess, tell myself, well, we're the best ones for this job. I'm not annoying them. I'm trying to help them. Clearly, if they're not using us, they're not getting the best benefit, or they're not spending their dollars as wisely as they could. I say that slightly facetiously, but by narrowing my focus and saying who I want to work with, it makes me feel better about chasing my targets, because I don't feel like I'm just running after anybody. Just as you said, the chiropractor's job isn't just to help people with a spine. You have to, narrow that down a little bit, and by doing that, it's easier to be more targeted and to measure your success. Kevin, as you...
I have a caveat in there, if I could just jump in there before the next question.
Yeah.
Avoid the credit line game. You cannot eat a credit line. If they say, well, I'll give you a credit line on my whatever it is, and you'll get lots of business from that. That is, in photography, that is the biggest lie in the world. It's even bigger than the checks in the mail.
Yeah, I could agree with that. And Skip, Kevin, as you look at this, and we're trying to, how do you make that focus? I think a lot of people that I talk with who are there trying to put themselves out there, they feel this incredible, overwhelming pressure to be experts at all things. I see way too much diversity in people's work, even people that are pretty respected. I was just looking at a very well-known photographer's website today, and he's very well-known for one type of thing, but he had a couple of galleries up to show some of his diversity, and I was thinking to myself, well, you're the guy that does those incredible sports portraits. Why am I looking at your desert plant life gallery? Yes, they're pretty, but that's just taking me off target. Why am I looking at this? And we're all guilty of that, because we all have images that we love, and trips and vacation photos and things we want to share. And how do you narrow that down? Kevin, how do you keep things focused? Skip, what would you say as well?
Skip, do you want to take it first, or shall I?
Yeah. Well, let me jump in. The first, this is what I love about special projects. Matthew Jordan Smith has talked about it. Kevin Kubota actually does a program on special projects. The first thing is you need to decide, and this goes back to how to focus your camera, but not focus on your business, your marketing. You need to decide who your target is, going back to what we've been saying all along, and then define what your specialty is going to be. And that's your specialty. That's the one that pays the bread and butter, and that's the one that gets you eating something beyond macaroni and cheese every single night.
Does ramen count?
Yeah, ramen noodles count. They're all in there. We've all done it. But to go a step further, this special projects help you stay focused on the passion. They don't necessarily need to be in your gallery. There are photographers all over the place that have special projects. They've got something they love doing, and they're photographing that particular thing in the hopes that, all right, maybe someday it's going to become a book, maybe it's a gallery opening, but it keeps my skills sharp and it keeps me growing in another direction, while whatever pays the bills is what I'm going to be an expert on. And I think there's also a piece in here that talks about how you define success. Whatever you show on your site is what you're going to wind up selling. If you get too diverse, then you wind up selling a little bit of everything, and you don't really, in fact, you'll actually wind up selling a lot of nothing if it's too diverse. You want that focus. You want to establish yourself as the expert, and that's what you want to spend the most time on. Now, at some point, there are logical spin-offs of that. If you're a wedding photographer, for example, then photographing babies and children and family becoming a logical extension. And if you hate doing that, then the other extension is to find a photographer whose work you admire and who you'd like to work with, and then you start to do referrals with each other, so that when you've got a client that you photographed at the wedding and they asked you if you'd be around, we'd love to get an updated family portrait now that the kids are starting to grow. If you don't want to do it, you've got somebody to refer it to, so you're never just sitting there looking at a client saying, well, I'm really sorry, I don't do that. You're still being helpful.
Always.
How's that? Is that for a good start, Kevin?
Well, you've set me up exactly right.
All right.
And it goes back to the referrals, Skip. You've got to have a strong referral network. I belong to a networking team that we meet every Friday morning at 7 o'clock for an hour and a half. And it's a very structured meeting. And I've been doing it, well, this October I'll have been doing it for 20 years. And it has paid off immensely. not only in business, but when I've got a client or a potential client and they've got a question, I've got this team of 25 people that I have breakfast with every morning that I can refer, and that makes me more valuable to them. But getting back to the marketing, it's who you know, it's not what you do. Now, I'm gonna disagree with you slightly, Skip.
Ooh.
I'm sorry. You know, it's like, let's take an art director at an ad agency and they're doing an ice cream campaign. They're going to go out and find a photographer that does the very best ice cream photographs. That's his specialty, which is another word for pigeonhole. And then you go to the art director and you say, well, okay, well, I only want you, I don't want you to art direct my car commercial because you do ice cream. He said, well, wait a minute, I can do a car commercial. And photographers can do more than what they've been selling as their specialty. And I think that your point is well taken, that if you are too diverse, you get a little bit of everything and not enough of one thing. At the same time, you've got to have something that keeps you fresh and excited about what you're doing, which is where the personal projects come in. At the same time, when you've got one and you've got the expertise in something, put it out there. And don't try to do everything, but say, gosh, you know, these are things I'm really good at and I'm really passionate about. I have building portraits, actors' headshots, beauty and fashion, and that type of thing that I really love doing. And so I've put all of that on the website, and you know, people, they're right there on the home page. There's a rotator that shows all of the services. Now I'm going to be blogging more and more about individual services, how to prepare for a shoot, what to do to make sure that it's successful, and what to expect. Again, setting myself up as an expert. So,
actually, I agree with you completely, but there's one thing that you just said. Your target audience there, you've paid attention to who your target audience is, and your target audience, sure, everybody for all three of those categories is a business commercial client.
Absolutely.
So you've got diversity within the specialty, but it's about seeing the world through your client's eyes. And there's a great line that I've used before, I think, on other Hangouts, from a marketing consultant in Texas by the name of Ed Foreman, who spoke to us at Polaroid 25 years ago. And the line was, if I can see the world through my client's eyes, then I can sell my client what my client buys. And it's a lot more diverse than just saying put yourself in their shoes. You have to see the world the way they do. You have to understand their concerns. You have to understand their interests. And Kevin, what you just described was this is what a business commercial client is going to be interested in, and I want to make sure I've got the ability to meet pretty much all of their needs, with the exception of being a combat photographer and doing their kids' weddings.
Right. Not interested. But you know what? I've got a really great wedding photographer friend of mine. As a matter of fact, our networking group does not allow more than one person from a discipline. And she joined the team for quite a while and got a lot of weddings out of it. But we had two photographers on the team, and everybody goes, oh, but that's crazy because you both shoot pictures. And yet we've got 7 different attorneys on the team. So go figure. You know, they just don't make the differentiation that a commercial photographer is not a wedding photographer. And I still refer weddings to Katie every time I have a chance, because she is. I was in a wedding once, and she was the photographer, and it was absolutely fabulous. And okay, Skip and Rich, I've got a confession. She wanted a picture with the bride, who is a very dear friend, and so I actually made a couple of pictures for her with her camera. So. All right. Well,
temporarily. So one second. Before, okay. One thing that stood out on this last conversation, though, that I think is important is I call it the rule of 5, which is I've never met a client who could understand that I do more than 5 things. So it's important that I pare down the list. You know, we have 5 fingers, and you know, people can count to 5 pretty quickly. But I always try to narrow it down so that they think of us as having, you know, 5 or less core specialty areas. But, you know, you're right, Kevin. Once I've got them in the door and they're doing work, oh, you guys can do these other things? Yeah, we can do that. You know, and they start to see that. And at that point it becomes, oh, well, we just want to do work with you guys because you're excellent with customer service and you're responsive and we like your creativity. And I think that that's a very easy way to open the door. So photographers that want to offer other services, you can still have those. And when the client expresses an interest, or they're on your blog and they're just looking at some of these more personal projects or things, then you can open the door with that. But I think it's important to not overwhelm people. And I'm in the process of doing this now, of just going through my website and killing things, trying to reduce the number of pages, reduce the amount of work samples. We'll still have that stuff that's accessible and that we can show people for custom galleries, but I'm finding that people can't understand, or they don't know what you're good at. And so the more you can simplify that down to 3 core things or 5 things, the easier it is for people to find you.
And as they discover more things that you do, that makes their job easy, because they found a vendor they can trust that does the work that they want, and they don't have to go out dating again. Nobody likes to date. And it's a matter of making yourself valuable. And when you're talking to a client, it's never about what I do. It's all about them. Every contact, when I'm doing those 11 follow-ups, there's something that I want to give them that's valuable about their business, not about what I do.
Absolutely.
So,
good point.
Those things are critical. If you can't do that, if you're using I, you're turning them off, because people want to hear about themselves, not about you. Okay. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Well, we're getting towards the end of the show. I'd like to wrap up with each of you with some closing advice, focusing on today's challenges. And I think, for me, the biggest challenge that I've been facing has been the abundance of fantastic work out there. It is so easy to find great images and to become depressed at how many other people could make great images. But the way that I get around it is I just remind myself that clients are hiring us not just because we can make great images, but because of the whole package we provide, of understanding their needs, of excellent service, of being valuable to them just before and after the job, and that's where the repeat businesses come from. We're entering our 15th year in business on my own, and it's the repeat business. And so I try to remind myself that not to become overwhelmed by the fact that the internet makes it easy to see all the possible talent in the world, that there's more than just the click, that there's what comes before and after. So that's my parting advice. Skip, Kevin, who wants to go first with their parting advice for our listeners today?
I think thanks, Skip. I agree with you, Rich, and it's really important that people that want to do this business, as Skip says, learn how to focus the camera, learn photography, learn lighting. Here's this guy that I mentioned that does the passport photos. He does 30 a day at $10 a piece, part-time, while he's running his insurance office. He's right across from a post office that has identically the same gear, but nobody at the post office knows how to use it. So he's making $300 a day not knowing what he's doing. So I mean, it boggles the mind when you think about that. So become an expert.
And I bet he could charge $15 a day, and then say the tagline, less wait time than the post office.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was actually in the post office, and I said, "Oh, we do passport photos," and they said, "No, actually, we don't. Go across the street." Okay. Well, I made a friend with the guy, and hopefully he can give me some business that he can't do. So it's constant marketing. Quality customer service, touching often but appropriately. And by touching, I mean, is it an email piece? Is it a letter? How are you outreaching? Is it a phone call? And they fall into 3 categories. It's visual, which would be email. It's audible, which would be a phone call. And it's personal, which would be a coffee or a lunch. And those are the things that, more than anything, if you do those things and you're consistent and persistent with it, you're going to be successful.
Excellent. Skip, how about you?
Yeah, work to build relationships. It kind of overlaps on everything you guys have said, but the big word today is networking. And networking 20 years ago, we all collected business cards. Networking is so much more than that, and it is about being involved. It's about going to every possible workshop you can. It's about going to every convention that you can. It's about getting to know all the vendors. Look at every single piece of gear in your studio, your software. Look at everything that you do and find somebody at each one of those companies, whether it's the rep at the camera company or your lab or your album company or somebody that's responsible for the lights you use in your studio. It's everything that you do so that you build out a network. And in that network also comes people in the community. Kevin mentioned the networking breakfast that he goes to. Dawn Shields in Missouri did a thing years ago that she started a networking luncheon in the wedding industry where everybody paid a small fee. She didn't make any money on the lunch, and everybody got together that had anything to do with the wedding industry. Imagine the power you'd get starting to get to know the baker, the florist, the bridal shop owner, the tuck shop owner, if you guys just all got together for lunch once a month, just to talk about what's going on in the business. And that's grown into a much more sophisticated thing for her today. But the reality is it's networking and it's relationship building. And to me, that's one of the biggest keys to having a good marketing plan.
Excellent. And I'll just put out there, tying some of that all together, I'm getting business leads from some of the other groups I belong to that have nothing to do with my industry. You know, by being an active parent involved in scouting with my kids, by being involved in my church, business opportunities open up. So it's just about being involved and being accessible, and I think that's great advice. Kevin,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, where can people find you? But go ahead and finish out your thought.
Well, you don't get business by talking to other photographers. You've got to go out and talk to people who aren't making photographs. The other photographers are your comfortable place, but you've got to get outside of places where you feel comfortable. And, you know, you've got to be uncomfortable when you're doing this. And everybody is uncomfortable. Everybody wants to know who they're going to play with at recess. And you got to remember that, and nobody's unapproachable. So anyway, to answer your question, Rich, KevinAmesPhotography.com and Kevin@AmesPhoto.com, or, of course, Kevin@PhotoFocus.com. And I do hope that folks will read the PhotoFocus blog because it is one of the top 10 photography blogs according to Resource Magazine.
Well, thank you for that, yes. And also check out Skip's site at Skip Cohen University. So, yeah, you can find me over at PhotoFocus, and Kevin is one of our contributing writers. That's just photofocus.com. There's a podcast 3 times a month and usually 2 or more articles each day. Skip, tell folks a couple of places to get in touch with you.
You'll find me, Skip Cohen, on Twitter and Skip Cohen on Facebook, and just about everything I'm doing these days all ties back into skipcohenuniversity.com.
Excellent, excellent. And Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. It was very nice to hear your perspective as a commercial photographer. We got some good feedback from people. And remember, folks, if you missed this and you didn't catch the whole show, or you want to share it with folks, the replay will be available in just a few minutes on the Google Plus page. We'll also be posting this to PhotoFocus this weekend. And Skip, you'd probably reshare the video as well through your network. So you can tell friends that they can check this out. Excellent advice today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Kevin, anything else you want to say before we go?
Just keep being consistent out there and do good work and great customer service. Build the photographic community.
Excellent. Skip, anything from you?
Nope, I'm with Kevin. Help build that community.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Mind Your Own Business Hangout. Also, a big thank you to Skip Cohen University and PhotoFocus for the promotion of the event, and our 2 partners, Drobo, that make an excellent storage solution, and SongFreedom, that will give you music that you can use in your next slideshow or video production. So be sure to check both those guys out. Thanks again so much for tuning in. My name's Rich Harrington.